My friend James Staten from Forrester Research, he's a VP and principal analyst at Forrester. He's one of the smartest guys in cloud computing, and I just want to invite James on up here real quick to get moving. So James is going to talk about the next wave of cloud computing that I think he calls second stage cloud. So Great. James, thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much for having me here. At Forrester, we look holistically at cloud, but more importantly, how enterprises are using it. And enterprises, as all of you know, that work for large enterprises, a little bit more conservative about going and using these cloud capabilities. So what we've found is that cloud is not dramatically different than other technologies we've had in the past, but it has a disruptive aspect to it, which means that we have to approach it a little bit differently. And what we've been doing is, with any disruptive technology, we take these technologies through cycles. And so the cycles that we take it through look like this. We spend a period of years evaluating these technologies, exploring what makes them different, where they fit, how they fit. And we do this with a unique set of users in our organization who are willing to be early adopters and try this out. And we do that as a result with the kind of applications that would be appropriate to that. After we're kind of comfortable with what it does, we move into a rationalization phase where we start to say, okay, now that I know what this is for and how it's different than the other choices were out there, let's start moving more of those kind of applications in. And we start to move the technology out of the hands of the early adopters into the hands of the early majority. And the early majority are different. They're not willing to take the same amount of risk. They're not willing to have to learn all these new capabilities and skills that might be necessary in the early adopter phase. And in that circumstance, they actually need help. They need assistance with these technologies. And they want these technologies to work at their skill set and their capability while still delivering the agility, the innovation, and allowing them to drive disruption. And that is where we are right now with cloud adoption. We've moved beyond the initial stage, and now we're in the rationalization phase. And that has all sorts of implications. So let me jump to what those implications are. In this second stage, we're at a point now where we are entering hypergrowth, which means when you move to early majority, you've got a 10x jump in the amount of people that start to use the technology. And that results in a significant growth rate for the market. You also have a shift that starts to take place in who brings the technology in. Since it's not the early adopters anymore, but now it's early majority, you start to see a shift away on the developer front from it being dominated by DevOps professionals to coders are now using this stuff, and coders don't want the burden of operations. And so they either bring in the ops team, or they require the service provider, the cloud provider, to supplement where their skills are lighter, or where they don't want to pay attention and have to be dealing with these issues. And this means that there's now a big role for IT operations to potentially fill if they have the right understanding and they have the right expertise. And if they don't have the right expertise or the right understanding, but they know this is the trend that's happening, and they know the company needs to be using more cloud at this point forward, they have to supplement. And the best possible way for that supplementation to take place is when the cloud provider themselves can deliver the managed services that close that gap. And as a result, we're seeing a move away from cloud being 100% self-service, you're on your own, good luck with email support, good luck with forum support, to I need a number. I need a person. I need a name that knows me and knows how I'm using this platform and can help me actually get the value from that. And that's not just a call for the person who's deploying the application. That's the call for the operations team who has SLAs to meet, because we don't consume cloud in isolation. We consume cloud in conjunction with things that are still running on-premise, things that are running in traditional hosting, things that are running in co-location. And as a result, we need to have an SLA across the service experience the customer gets, not unique SLAs on each of the silos that gets managed and maintained. And so the value shifts away from a pure cloud play running in isolation to a hybrid play, where the cloud provider themselves has multiple deployment options, where they have connections back to your data center, where they have partnerships with the telco and networking companies that allow those connections to be secure, fast, with quality of service, and where you have more opportunity to be hybrid in your definition, not hybrid because of the restrictions the cloud provider puts on what you could or could not do in that environment. Now, I talk about this as sort of a big sea change, but these sea changes take years to take place, and we're just at the very beginning of this. So this is where providers who already recognize what is different in stage 2 can really grow to significance within your organization and in the market in general by knowing this. But we're just at the very beginning here. So don't expect that you can call any cloud provider today and get that level of support. Don't expect that you can open the door to cloud to your entire coder environment and they'll all be able to be successful. There's education, there's learning, there's a significant amount of operational and organizational and cultural change in your company that's going to be necessary for you to really act on this change that's taking place. The key, start now. So what does that mean? If we're getting into a hypergrowth mode, that means you should expect a lot more SaaS applications to come into your organization. You may actually start proactively bringing SaaS applications in from the central IT department. You're going to see a lot more value from cloud platforms and cloud-based business services, which means you may start migrating applications, modernizing applications, and creating brand new applications directly on these cloud platforms as we go forward. And we see this in the data that we get from developers who have cloud experience. So if you look at this particular slide, let me explain what you're seeing here. On the current line, the percentages you see there are the percent of survey respondents who said that the percentage of their code running in the cloud right now aligns to the colors that you see represented there. Dark green, the largest segment on the current line, that says that 40% of the respondents to the survey are only putting up to, but no more than 20% of the code they generate on the cloud platform. Now let's move down to the 2015 estimate. Same developers, how much code are you going to have in the cloud in 2 years? Or in this case now, in 1 year. What is highlighted here is the dark blue. There are 30% of respondents saying that in the next year, they will have 60 to 79% of the code they create in the cloud. That's not a, maybe we'll add a little bit more. This is, we figured out what the cloud can do, we figured out that it works, we figured out it's stable, and we're moving. Now this isn't all developers, this is just developers who have experience putting code in the cloud. And that experience is going to lead to a significant shift in where they want to put the code. And that's why your organization needs to start paying attention to this and how you're going to be experiencing hypergrowth. Now, I mentioned that we're moving into early majority, which means that the people who are going to consume this aren't your DevOps skilled people. We're going to be starting to expose them to cloud at the coder level, where they write code, but they don't configure middleware, they don't patch the OS, they don't take responsibility for any of the infrastructure. You shouldn't have to burden them with having to learn that stuff. You should be able to allow them to be successful at just knowing the code, but that means supplementing for the rest. Same with rapid devs. Rapid devs are people who don't typically code. They use visual interfaces, visual tools to build out new applications and new capabilities. They shouldn't have to learn to code. And they certainly shouldn't have to learn how to configure a load balancer or patch an operating system. So enabling the clouds to be suitable to them will mean taking advantage of things that historically have been called platform as a service that fit that use case much better. But there is no distinction anymore between this is platform as a service and this over here is infrastructure as a service. The lines are blurring between these things. On the same cloud platform, you can get PaaS value for certain services and capabilities, for certain developer types, and you can get DevOps value within that same cloud environment. So don't think that you have to use different clouds to achieve these objectives. Expect your cloud provider to give you experience levels and give you appropriate tools for these use cases. Now, the key to really having success on the cloud is that you have to change your mindset when it comes to security, availability, compliance, and the operational model. And the mindset you have to shift to is one that we've been talking about for quite some time as the uneven handshake. The uneven handshake is a really important concept. If that's the only thing you remember from what I said, that's success in my mind. Why do we call it an uneven handshake? Well, some vendors will call this a shared responsibility. So if you go to a cloud and the cloud says we're PCI compliant, does that immediately mean that you can put any application on there and it will be PCI compliant? No, it does not. What they are saying when they say the cloud is PCI compliant is that up to the point of abstraction where their multi-tenant automated shared standardized service stops and down, they have done compliance work to ensure that from that point down, you'll meet those requirements. That means that your responsibility is from that line of abstraction up. So if you happen to deploy an application there and you don't have the proper patch level in the OS and you break compliancy, don't expect the cloud provider to meet you in court over this issue. You're going to be responsible for that. Same thing if you misconfigure the middleware or if you leave port 80 open. Those are all your responsibilities. And if you don't trust that your Rapid App developers or your coders are going to get this right, and you're not sure that your IT operations team really understands what is involved in the uneven handshake and how far they have to get involved. They maybe aren't familiar with the monitoring tools. They don't know how to configure the security on top of this cloud environment. Or they approach security and say, well, if I run it and I manage it, it must be secure. If anybody runs it any other way, it's not. That's the mindset that has to change. And this is a key place that managed services can fill the gap. Now, don't expect a cloud provider with their standard cloud services to sign any and every SLA. They're going to give you one SLA because it's the same SLA everybody else gets. And why is that a good thing? Because everybody's using the same service. Multiple companies are running and using that exact same service in exactly the same way. If they negotiated and changed the SLA for you, they would have to move you off of that multi-tenant standardized automated low-cost service onto something that they would put you on in isolation, because they have to meet that unique SLA. But I want a unique SLA, and I want their managed services to give me that unique SLA. You negotiate that in the managed services part, not ask them to change the bottom line service. That's how you achieve in an uneven handshake the support you need to meet your requirements. And if you do this with the cloud provider themselves, you know for sure they know how to configure your environment, monitor your environment, what third-party elements to bring, agents to deploy into your application that will ensure that that SLA can be met on that cloud platform. And that's the unique value that you want to achieve by going through the uneven handshake. And that's what managed cloud is. And that's why when you look to cloud providers that you choose out there, look for this value proposition, because you're going to need it as you expand the amount of people in your organization who have exposure to and leverage these cloud services. So with that, I'm going to bring John back on the stage, and thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
I thought that was pretty cool. The overview that James gives is always really compelling in terms of where things are headed in the cloud, and I appreciate his insights, and I hope you did too.